This hearing will come to order, and there is a vote in progress. So my intention here is to begin the hearing, and then we will suspend for the duration of the votes and allow the other members of the committee to come forward. But in this fashion, myself and Congressman Poe can make our opening statements, and maybe some of the other members will be able to as well. So this hearing is on the future of U.S.-Pakistan relations. The committee has repeatedly urged Pakistan to take meaningful action against key Islamist terrorist groups operating within its territory. Unfortunately, Pakistan, which is now home to the world's fastest-growing nuclear weapons program, has remained a fount of radical Islamist thought. It was no surprise that one of the San Bernardino attackers, Tashfeen Malik, studied at a Pakistani school spreading a particularly fundamentalist message. Looking back, the 9/11 terrorist attacks transformed U.S.-Pakistan relations overnight. After more than a decade under sanctions for its nuclear proliferation, Pakistan was to be a key ally in combating Islamist militancy, becoming a leading recipient of U.S. aid in the nearly 15 years since. But while the U.S. was quick to embrace Pakistan, Pakistan has hardly reciprocated. Pakistani governments have come and gone, but its northwestern frontier has remained a terrorist haven, with its security services supporting what it considers to be good Islamist terrorist groups. These good groups, under Pakistan's calculus, destabilize Afghanistan and threaten neighboring India, while the government simultaneously opposes what it considers the bad Islamist groups. Today, Deobandi schools create an infrastructure of hate. 600 Deobandi madrasas, funded with Gulf state money, teach intolerant, hate-filled rhetoric that inspires the foot soldiers of jihadist terrorism. I've made 3 trips to Islamabad to press this issue. Pakistan must do the work to register schools and close those creating new generations of radicals. And those are the schools that are being funded with Gulf state money, the Deobandi schools, and they need to be closed. Meanwhile, Pakistan's nuclear arsenal is on a track to be the 3rd largest. Its addition of small tactical nuclear weapons in recent years is even more troubling. This is a country which spends a 1/5 of its budget on the military, from long-range missiles to F-16s, but under 2.5% on education. Through all of the double-dealing, U.S. policy has essentially stood still. Security assistance, cash and arms, has continued to flow under the occasional temporary delays. Indeed, despite some Department of Defense assistance for Pakistan being held because of inadequate efforts against the Haqqani network, the State Department is currently seeking more arms for Islamabad. Pakistan itself has been devastated by terrorism, with thousands, over 2,000, of its soldiers killed, thousands and thousands of its citizens killed in terrorist attacks. Today, we recognize the year anniversary of a horrific attack on a school in Peshawar that killed over 100 children. We want a strong partnership with the country, but a new policy is long overdue. One option, as Ranking Member Engel and I proposed earlier this year, would be to target those officials who maintain relationships with designated terrorist groups with travel and financial sanctions. This would make it clear the U.S. and Pakistan cannot have a true strategic partnership until Pakistan's security services cuts ties with terrorist organizations. Recently, senior U.S. officials, including National Security Advisor Susan Rice and Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken, have traveled to Islamabad, reportedly to press on the Pakistani government. We look forward to hearing from our witnesses today whether there is reason for hope or if our policy is stuck in the same rut. And I now will turn to Mr. Ted Poe of Texas, and then Mr. Dana Rohrabacher of California for their opening statements. Mr. Poe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern specifically is with our relationship with Pakistan. The United States has given Pakistan $30 billion since 9/11. I think Pakistan is a Benedict Arnold ally to the United States. Even going back to May the 2nd, 2011, when there was the raid in Pakistan on Osama bin Laden. We didn't tell the Pakistanis we were coming because, frankly, they would snitch us off and Osama bin Laden would have left. And the near confrontation that took place between the U.S. and Pakistan after the raid, Pakistan scrambled 2 U.S.-made F-16s and were headed to the area where the raid took place, and a possible confrontation with 2 U.S.-made jets against American helicopters at the raid didn't happen, but it could have happened. Pilots that presumably were trained the year before in 2010 in Tucson, Arizona, and I think we need to be very concerned about providing armaments for Pakistan, who seems to play all the sides. And I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I now yield time to Mr. Dana Rohrabacher of California.
Thank you very much. When I was elected 28 years ago, I think most people considered me Pakistan's best friend in the House of Representatives. And let me just say that over the years, I've been deeply disappointed that those people who I considered to be my friends were betraying the trust of the United States and were committing acts that were only the acts that an enemy would commit, even though we continued to have a facade of friendship. We've given $30 billion since 9/11 to Pakistan, yet we realize that that's since 9/11. Yet we still see that, and there's ample evidence that Pakistan is still deeply involved with various terrorist networks, and including supporting the Taliban in Afghanistan and radicals who kill Americans. We've been, frankly, our relationship with Pakistan has been a disgrace. We have a government that gave safe haven to Osama bin Laden, the murderer of 3,000 Americans slaughtered in front of us. I don't think anybody believes that the high-level people in the Pakistan government didn't know about that. They continue to hold Dr. Afridi just to rub it in our face that the type of relationship they have with us. And to their own people, they're slaughtering people in Baluchistan and the Sindhis and others who are being brutally oppressed by a clique in their government. So it's not all Pakistan, but the clique that runs that country is treating us like suckers, and they should, because we're acting foolish. We've got a very foolish giving people money who have continually to involve themselves in activity that's harmful to the United States of America is not going to win their friendship. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that we face facts, and if the Pakistani government wants to be our friend, they can be our friend, but they have not been. And they need to change that if we are to continue to have on the relationship that we've had. I would like to, at this point, submit for the record a number of articles showing that, again, Pakistan continues to support various terrorist operations, as well as their relationship with China at the expense of their own people, the Baluch in particular, and I submit that for the record at this point.
Without objection.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
And Mr. Rohrabacher, we have 4 votes on the floor, so we will recess the hearing and return for witness testimony and questions after those 4 votes, and we appreciate the patience of our witness and those in attendance, and for now, we stand in recess.
The committee is in order. We will first hear for an opening statement if Dr. Bera would like to make one, and then I will introduce the ambassador. He will make his statement, and we will get to the questions and answers. Dr. Bera is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I will keep my comment short so we hear from the ambassador, but obviously as we look at the South Asian region, we look at India, we look at Pakistan, the relationship is incredibly important, particularly as the changing mission in Afghanistan is, the role of Pakistan and India in stabilizing the region is incredibly complex and important. It's an honor to welcome Ambassador Olson to the job. I understand this is your first month on the job, so looking forward to hearing the testimony, looking forward to working with you, and looking forward to furthering the relationship between the United States and South Asia and stabilizing the region. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bera. And the chairman would like to express his sorrow for not being here, Mr. Ambassador, but he is leading the charge on the House floor on 4 bills from our committee, and that's why he's not here, and that's why Mr. Engel is not here either. So we are now pleased to be joined by Ambassador Richard Olson. Ambassador Olson is the special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Immediately prior to this appointment, Ambassador Olson served as the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan, but he has served in many capacities all over the world since joining the State Department in 1982. Ambassador Olson has been recognized several times for his service, including being awarded the Presidential Distinguished Service Award. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Ambassador. Without objection, the witness's full prepared statement will be made a part of the record, and members will have 5 calendar days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous material for the record. Ambassador Olson, please summarize your remarks.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the current state of the United States' bilateral relationship with Pakistan. I'm honored to testify in front of you for the first time in my capacity as U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, after having served as your ambassador in Pakistan and previously at our embassy in Kabul. I'm humbled and privileged to be in this new role at such a critical time for the U.S. relationship with both Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's clear to me that despite many challenges, Pakistan will continue to be an important partner for the United States for the foreseeable future, particularly in light of our enduring presence in Afghanistan. While we do not always see eye to eye on every issue, our relationship with Pakistan is vital to the national security of the United States. Most importantly, we have the opportunity to continue working with Pakistan today on counterterrorism issues along with strategic stability, economic growth, and democratic governance to help shape a future in which Pakistan is more stable, increasingly prosperous, and plays a constructive role in the region. Pakistan is a complex place, and it is important not to overlook the significant progress made in the last few years. In 2013, Pakistan completed its first democratic transition from one elected civilian government to another. During the past 2 years, we can point to progress, however imperfect, made across the economic and security sectors. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his team have restored macroeconomic stability to Pakistan and improved economic growth. While structural changes are still needed to set Pakistan's economy on a path to accelerated growth, the reforms to date are a considerable accomplishment. There have been substantial changes on the security front. Beginning in June 2014, Pakistan initiated large-scale counterterrorism operations in the federally administered tribal areas. The subsequent Peshawar Army school attack of exactly 1 year ago today was cited by terrorists as retribution for Pakistan's operations. It galvanized public opinion in Pakistan and prompted Pakistan to increase its counterterrorism efforts, not just in tribal areas. Through these operations, Pakistan has rooted out many terrorist safe havens and recovered more than 160 tons of improvised explosive device precursors. In addition to taking action on internal threats, Pakistan's CT cooperation with the United States on al-Qaeda has been critical in decimating the organization. However, while Pakistan has made significant sacrifices in its fight against terrorism, we believe it can also take more steps to put pressure on all terrorist groups in Pakistan that threaten regional stability. Pakistan is becoming a more constructive actor in the region. Last July, Pakistan facilitated a direct meeting between the Afghan government and Taliban representatives in Murree, Pakistan, a milestone in our ongoing efforts to pursue a political settlement in Afghanistan. Last week, Pakistan hosted the Regional Heart of Asia Conference, attended by President Ghani, which yielded productive discussions about regional cooperation to advance the peace process and Afghanistan's long-term stability. In addition, India and Pakistan's commitment last week to restart a bilateral dialogue is particularly important. In describing this progress, it is nonetheless clear that real challenges remain. While we see progress in decreasing the presence of certain terrorists in Pakistan, we continue to press Pakistan to target all militant groups that have safe haven in Pakistan, particularly the Taliban, including the Haqqani Network and Lashkar-e-Taiba. We have made it clear to the Pakistanis that these organizations threaten Pakistan, the region, and the panoply of our mutual national security interests, and they must be addressed rigorously. We have also asked Pakistan to do all that it can to help recover U.S. citizen hostages held on Pakistani territory. We continue to press for greater cooperation between Afghanistan and Pakistan, both to stabilize the common border region and to build the constructive relationship necessary for regional stability. It is also critical that Pakistan improve relations with its other neighbor, India. Recent high-level talks between Indian and Pakistani officials and the announcement of the resumption of formal dialogue is welcome. We hope the dialogue will be used to reduce tensions and increase ties between the two nations. Naturally, as Pakistan seeks to combat violent extremism and pursue counterinsurgency and counterterrorism objectives, we continue to encourage and support Pakistan to strengthen the rule of law, civil liberties, respect for human rights, accountability, and freedom of speech, which we firmly believe are vital to lasting peace and security. Our civilian assistance programs help make progress towards these economic and governance ends in a developing democracy, and it is essential they are sustained at current levels. With that, I would like to conclude my statement, Madam Chair, and I'm available for your questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. Last month, I led a congressional delegation trip to Afghanistan and was joined by my friend and colleague from this committee, Dr. Yoho. And while obviously this hearing is on the future of U.S.-Pakistan relations, we all know that we can't really address the future of our bilateral relationship without also discussing Afghanistan. When our delegation met with President Ghani, he told us that he has reached out his hand to Pakistan only to be rebuffed. We all know that in order for for Afghanistan to be stable and secure, Pakistan will have to play a key role there. Some argue that Pakistan's ultimate goal is to use Afghanistan as a sort of strategic depth against India, and that Pakistan prefers an insecure Afghanistan and is using its proxies and ties to insurgent groups to exert control in Afghanistan. I wanted to hear your perspective on that. In fact, in its report to Congress and the progress towards security and stability in Afghanistan, the DoD openly stated that Pakistan uses these proxy forces to hedge against the loss of influence in Afghanistan and to counter India's superior military. Do you know if it's true that Ghani is being rebuffed by Pakistan? And what is Pakistan's strategic objective with regard to Afghanistan? And then I wanted to ask about the terrorist safe havens inside of Pakistan's borders. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to President Ghani, as I mentioned in my opening statement, he did travel to the Heart of Asia conference last week. And of course, we have applauded President Ghani's outreach to Pakistan, which has been one of the notable characteristics of his time in office. And we believe that Pakistan has been wanting to reciprocate this outreach. One of that Pakistan has taken several steps that are important in this regard. The first is that they hosted the Murray talks with the Taliban in July between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban, the first time that the Taliban had sat down with the government of Afghanistan. And at the Heart of Asia conference last week, they reaffirmed, President Nawaz Sharif reaffirmed his support for the sovereignty of Afghanistan, the territorial integrity of Afghanistan, the legitimacy of its government and its constitution, all of which were, I think, important points for President Ghani. So we will continue to work with Pakistan to encourage them to bring the Taliban to the table to resume a peace and reconciliation process that is led by the Afghans and owned by the Afghans. Thank you.
So although the countries have had a rocky relationship, you believe that with the new government and there will be brighter days ahead and the level of cooperation will be higher and that there will be more trust and partnerships evolving from this?
Yes, ma'am. We think there are, of course, many challenges in the Afghanistan and Pakistan relationship, but we think that the interests of a stable and peaceful Afghanistan are best served by having a positive relationship with Pakistan, which I think is the strategic vision of both President Ghani and Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif.
Well, thank you. We hope so. What is Pakistan doing to help eliminate the terrorist safe havens inside of its borders? We hear so much about that. And I believe that the U.S. isn't effectively using our leverage in Afghanistan to convince the Pakistanis to do more with us and our Afghan partners on the counterterrorism front, to work with them rather than against the Afghan government and against its security forces. And we have a pending military package before us on this committee, and I believe we need to use that as leverage. Have we made progress in getting buy-in from Pakistan on our counterterrorism efforts in Afghanistan, in eliminating terrorist safe havens inside Pakistan? And why should Congress approve arms sales to Pakistan when our own Defense Department is telling us that Pakistan is openly working against our objectives when it comes to Afghanistan, safe havens, and counterterrorism?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to Pakistan's own counterterrorism operations, in June of 2014, Pakistan launched Operation Zarb-e-Azb against militant strongholds in North Waziristan tribal agency. This is something that the United States has wanted for a number of years because there were a number of groups located in North Waziristan, specifically in Miran Shah, that threatened U.S., Afghanistan, as well as others. During the course of this operation, over the course of more than a year and a half, the Pakistanis have lost nearly 500 troops. 488 it was just announced. At the same time, they have carried out counterterrorism operations throughout the settled areas of Pakistan, that is to say the non-tribal areas, the rest of Pakistan. And despite the terrible incident at the Peshawar Army School a year ago, there has been less blowback than might have been expected from the terrorists. As I said at the outset in my statement, most of the action has been. We think there is more that can be done in terms of targeting groups that don't just target the Pakistan internally, but are threats to their neighbors. And we continue to have an active dialogue with them. I had a very active dialogue during my 3 years in Pakistan on the question of the Haqqanis and also the question of Lashkar-e-Taiba, although Pakistan has taken steps to ban Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Thank you, and I will leave the other questions to another member, we're going to move on to Dr. Bera.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. You know, as Indian American and the only Indian American member of Congress, you know, the stability of the region is incredibly important to me, and it's one that, you know, have spent a lot of time thinking about, and very much interconnected when you think about India, you know, Pakistan and Afghanistan. You know, again, it is not easy. On the counterterrorism side, you know, I think post Mumbai in 2008, India demonstrated incredible restraint in, you know, its approach to Pakistan. Pakistan, you know, as Ambassador Olson, you mentioned, it is the one-year anniversary of the horrific Peshawar school shooting. The fact that, you know, I would have expected Pakistan to have a much more robust crackdown on the terrorist threats on the LET and Haqqani network and others. You know, from our perspective, I think from the perspective of the Indians, you know, there's almost this side-by-side relationship in Pakistan with some of these terrorist networks that, you know, almost symbiotic. They live side by side. From your perspective, what are the steps that Pakistan's government, its military needs to do to reduce the terrorist threats? Because again, in some ways, it is almost as though they allow these networks to exist in Pakistan to destabilize the region or to have this constant threat on India. So.
Thank you, Congressman. I agree with you that there continues to be challenges in this area. It's important to note that Pakistan has really had a shift over the course of the last year and a half. They have suffered enormously from terrorism. Over 2,000 soldiers, service members killed, and many thousands of individual Pakistani citizens have died as a result of terrorist outrages. And the government has a stated commitment articulated both by the Prime Minister and the Army Chief to go after all terrorists without distinction. We believe there is more that can be done with regard to Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Taliban, including particularly the Haqqani network, and that's a very active element of our dialogue. I think it's safe to say that we have almost no meeting with the appropriate officials in which those topics are not raised in very vigorous terms. I think it is safe to say that the attacks that the clearing of North Waziristan has resulted in disruption, if not elimination, of the Haqqani network's operational ability. And as I mentioned before, they have banned Lashkar-e-Taiba, but there is still work to be done in this area.
And it does still appear, from my perspective, that there's this coexistence that you know that they tolerate some of these terrorist networks. You know, looking at you know, kind of projecting out as India undergoes this dramatic growth in its economy and GDP. You know, I do worry that Pakistan seems to be stagnating. And as you see the ways of life change in these two countries that have a tense relationship, you know, it does worry me a little bit that you know, Pakistan doesn't seem to be developing its economy, doesn't seem to be building those institutions that would create stability. And in many ways, the civilian institutions that you would want to create a more stable Pakistan, those investments certainly aren't occurring. I know we have, over the years, tried to create schools, tried to create civilian institutions that would, you know, create some stability. From your perspective, Ambassador Olson, where should the United States focus? And you know, I would say that I'm critical that much of our focus has been on military sales, which I don't think stabilized the region. In fact, I think they destabilized the region. If we were to focus on civilian institutions, where would you suggest that we place our focus?
Well, thank you, Congressman. First of all, let me just say a quick word since you began talking about India, about the recent upturn in relations between India and Pakistan, which I think is quite significant. As you know, the national security advisors met in Bangkok, and then Foreign Minister Swaraj attended the Heart of Asia conference and extended a hand of friendship to Pakistan, and that was very well received. And they have agreed to launch a comprehensive dialogue, which will, I think, hopefully improve the relationship. One of the emphases that we have placed in our assistance programs has been to build regional connectivity. And so the relaunch of a comprehensive dialogue will hopefully, exactly as you say, lead to the possibility of increased trade, for instance, between India and Pakistan, which we think would be beneficial to both sides, and particularly help Pakistan. It could do more, frankly, in some ways than our assistance programs to raise the level of prosperity and stability.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Dr. Bera.
yield back.
Judge Poe is recognized.
I thank the Chair. Thank you, Ambassador. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I want to be very specific about what I'm concerned about, and that is the sale of American fighter jets to Pakistan, or the giving of American fighter jets to Pakistan through military aid. That military aid is then used in the United States to buy those jets. And I use the example of Osama bin Laden. The Pakistanis, the military, hit him out, in my opinion. United States didn't tell Pakistan we're going after him because they'd moved him. We sent helicopters over there. The raid was successful. Pakistan scrambles 2 American-made F-16s to intercept the helicopters. Americans were able to get away, and there could have been a confrontation. How ironic that would have been, American-made jets used by Pakistan in a confrontation with American-made helicopters in the raid against Osama bin Laden. Now we're again in this issue of more military aid to Pakistan. I understand that there's $660 million in aid going to Pakistan proposed. Some of that's going to be military aid. Supposedly the 8 fighter jets, F-16s, America makes the best fighter jets in the world, is in this package, and it's supposed to be used for humanitarian aid. Now, I don't know how an F-16 with all of its hardware on there for combat can be used for humanitarian aid. If they were buying C-130s, which I used to be in a squadron of C-130s back in Texas, I could see those being used for humanitarian aid. F-16s, it's not really humanitarian aid that they're built for or used for. And are we going to be in the same situation with the sale of fighter jets for humanitarian aid, where we were in the raid with Osama bin Laden, that these jets will be used for other purposes? I don't trust Pakistan. Maybe you do. I don't. We had the former ambassador of Pakistan, Mr. Haghani, here and testified before my subcommittee, and says that Pakistan still ends up supporting terrorists. Do they support them in any way? Does Pakistan support terrorist groups in any way? Not just a little, but not just a much, but do they support them? Or are they free from doing that now? Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Judge Poe. With regard to Pakistan does have a fleet of F-16s, and they have been developing a precision strike capability with those F-16s, which they have used to considerable effect in North Waziristan and in the tribal areas generally. This is within a framework of our security assistance to Pakistan, which has 6 objectives basically centered around counterinsurgency and counterterrorism. It's our belief that the F-16s have been used very effectively, the precision strike capability to take out terrorist targets, including safe havens that threaten our forces in Afghanistan.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Ambassador, my question
Yes.
is very specific. Does the Pakistan military, the government, do they still give a safe haven or support, directly or indirectly, terrorist groups? I mean, they may go after some terrorist groups, but do they still give them a safe haven or a pass, whatever words you want to use? Or are they after all of the terrorist groups? Do we have any assurance one way or the other?
Well, Congressman, with regard to these groups, we have had a very active dialogue with them where we have pressed them repeatedly to take action against those groups that have a presence on Pakistani soil, including the Haqqani network and the Taliban in general, and also Lashkar-e-Taiba. Their operations in North Waziristan have had a disruptive effect. They, for instance, uncovered arms caches that belonged to the Haqqanis and were associated with the Haqqani Mosque in Miran Shah. I've been to Miran Shah and seen some of the results of these efforts, but we do believe that there is more that can be done, and that we continue to press them very hard on that matter.
Thank you, Judge
I yield
Poe.
back.
Ms. Kelly of Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you consider the future of U.S.-Pakistan relations, what do you see as the key aims and drivers of our Pakistan policy? Excuse me.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. We believe that the best way forward with Pakistan is continued engagement, developing Pakistan's civilian economy, its ability to be a stable and prosperous country. It's a country that faces many challenges, some of which we've already identified. It faces challenges from terrorism, from violent extremism. It faces a large demographic challenge as the youth bulge comes into what should be their most productive years. We believe it's in our interest to continue engagement with Pakistan, and so that Pakistan is able to effectively harness the youth, having them be educated and prepared for the job market, so that Pakistan plays a more constructive role in the region as a whole.
Where do you think our policies have been most successful, and if there's, and looking back, if there's something you could change, what would that be?
Well, I think that our assistance programs over the past 5 years, our civilian assistance programs have made a real impact on the life of ordinary Pakistanis. We have, through the so-called Kerry Lugar-Berman authorization, added, it has been focused in 5 areas: energy, economic growth, stabilization, health, and education. Some of the accomplishments that we have been, that we can point to include adding 1,750 megawatts to Pakistan's electricity grid. Electricity is a huge problem for ordinary Pakistanis. We've added 1,000 kilometers of roads, many of those in the western part of the country connecting to Afghanistan, so that there's greater regional connectivity and farmers can get produce to market. Committed over $250 million to returning refugees from the North Waziristan operation to their homes. We have extensive exchange programs. We bring many Pakistanis to the United States for study, which we think will shape their future attitudes to the United States. We have the largest, most extensively funded Fulbright program in the world in Pakistan. And we've built 1,000 schools and funded 15,000 domestic scholarships and 23 U.S.-Pakistan university partnerships. Finally, in health, I would just say that we have launched a hospital in Jacobabad and rehabilitated a major OBGYN center at the Jinnah Postgraduate Medical Center in Karachi. So we're addressing and focusing on maternal health care, which is a very important issue in terms of the overall health of the population.
Then something you think should be altered, or what would that be?
Well, I think that it's important for us to continue engagement with Pakistan, despite the challenges of the relationship, which are many. We believe that it is in our national interest not to allow Pakistan to become disengaged from us, and I think we can draw on the lessons of history there, especially the period in the 1990s and late 1980s when we did somewhat disengage from the region, and we paid, I think, a significant price as a country for that at the beginning of the last decade. And I think that with all of the challenges of the relationship, I think it's most important for the U.S. to be engaged and to build a partnership with Pakistan.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And now we will move to Mr. Rohrabacher of California.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Ambassador, you got a mighty tough job. And we have to respect you for that, and thank you for trying to do your best. Unfortunately, what I'm about to say does not reflect on your commitment, but on the feasibility of you succeeding in what you're trying to do. The fact is that Pakistan has, from its very beginning, been plagued with corruption and oppression by its own government. The brutality and corruption in Pakistan was so bad that early on in 1971, the people of Bangladesh couldn't take it anymore. And their uprising was, of course, answered not by trying to reform their government, but instead by brutal suppression, which led to the independence of Bangladesh. We see similar, Mr. Ambassador, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I see similar type of sentiments and a situation arising with the people of Baluchistan. There is now these F-16s that the judge was talking about. Those F-16s and the military equipment that we are providing Pakistan are being used against their own people, just like they did against the people of over there in Bangladesh. And so am I mistaken in that we are using weapons that are provided, that they are using weapons provided by us against their own people in Baluchistan and elsewhere?
First of all, thank you, Congressman, very much for your support and your kind words. I appreciate it greatly. Let me say, with regard to corruption, there have been, as part of the National Action Plan that Pakistan adopted after the horrific attack on the Army school, there is an element of improving governance and going after corruption. And that has been particularly notable lately in some of the operations that have taken place in Karachi. There has been an anti-corruption element to the government's action there.
You know, Mr. Ambassador,
Yeah.
I want to have to tell you that this is about the third time that over the last 25 years that I've heard this. It's always, they're now moving forward with the anti-corruption drive. And I won't count on it, but if it happens, I will be very happy about that, and the American people will rejoice with the people of Pakistan that the crooks finally got displaced up in Islamabad. The ISI has been, and the judge made his point, and I think that your answer suggests what's really going on. The ISI is still engaged in terrorism as a strategy for what they believe is going to defend their country or give their country leverage. And we saw that in attacks on India and attacks on and the efforts of course, supporting the Taliban, et cetera. Until that changes, until the people of Baluchistan, for example, don't have to suffer with this, where their people are being grabbed and then bodies are dumped in large numbers, this is a travesty. And for the United States to provide weapons to a government like in Islamabad, which then is used against them, but even worse, Pakistan and these people who run that country, their approach to the United States, the judge was right. If we were thwarted in trying to bring to justice Osama bin Laden, it would have been because the Pakistanis were using American jets to shoot our people down. We calculated on that. That was not out of the realm of possibility. And the fact that that is the reality of it, and we end up giving them billions of dollars of military equipment, no wonder they don't respect us. And one last thing, Dr. Afridi, you know, we know now Osama bin Laden was given safe haven in that country. The man who slaughtered 3,000 Americans were given safe haven. The one guy that helped us make sure we could bring that monster to justice is now lingering in a dungeon in Pakistan. This is their answer to us. This is what that's a message to the people of the United States. They are thumbing their nose at us and taking our money, and they are saying, here's the guy, yeah, we'll tell those Americans, the guy who helped bring Osama bin Laden to justice, we're just going to throw him in that dungeon, and that's a message to the American people. It's time for us to quit taking that and stand up for truth, and if we do, and justice, we'll be siding with the Pakistani people and not their corrupt, brutal government.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrabacher. Mr. Higgins of New York.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ambassador, a few minutes ago you spoke of the hopeful signs of the relationship between Pakistan and India. I want to focus on the more troubling signs of the relationship with India, but also with that of the United States. You know, Pakistan, let's just be truthful about this, plays a double game. They're our military partner, but they're the protector and the patron of our enemies, and this has been going on for 15 years. Since 2002, United States aid to Pakistan, economic and military, has averaged about $2 billion a year. Pakistan's annual defense budget is only about $5 billion a year. So we, the United States, finances a major portion of their economic and defense military budget. Yet by every measure, terrorism has become worse in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. In 2010, the most generous U.S. aid package to Pakistan of $4.5 billion, $4.5 billion. And the United States suffered the highest level of casualties in Afghanistan, almost 500 soldiers. Also, you know, Pakistan is involved in an arms race against what it believes is its existential threat with India. In fact, according to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Pakistan could have 350 nuclear warheads in the next decade, becoming the world's third biggest nuclear power, outpacing India, France, China, and the United Kingdom. There is no positive sign of any improved relations with India because Pakistan justifies its nuclear proliferation as a deterrent against aggression from the outside. So the United States has to get tougher with Pakistan, and we have to call them out on this double game that they've been playing, not this year, not last year, not 5 years, but for the past 15 years. I can appreciate in you, in your capacity, must try to, I guess, deal with these issues as diplomatically as possible. But when you really look at the cold, hard facts, Pakistan is not an ally to the United States. They have facilitated, they have encouraged, they have been a protector of the very enemies. So there's these two conversations going on. There's one when the Americans are in the room, and the other conversation when we're not in the room. And the one that is most detrimental to us, the American people, our American soldiers, is the one that's going on when we're not in the room. I'd ask you to comment.
Thank you, Congressman. And I want to say that we do share your concern, particularly about the development of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. We're concerned both by the pace and the scope of Pakistan's nuclear and missile program, including its pursuit of short-range nuclear systems. We are concerned that a conventional conflict in South Asia could escalate to include nuclear use, as well as the increased security challenges that accompany growing stockpiles. I can tell you, sir, that we have had a very active dialogue at the highest levels with the Pakistanis, in which we have made clear the nature of our very specific concerns.
Mr. Ambassador, with all due respect, we have heard this for the past 15 years. You know, here's my concern, and I apologize for cutting you off, but I only have a couple more. I have a minute. If Pakistan falls apart, or if Islamic extremists take over, it's a nightmare scenario for us. It's a big country, about 180 million people. It has a lot of Islamic extremists, and it has nuclear weapons. And to have Islamic extremists with nuclear weapons is a primary goal of al-Qaeda. And it would be a major victory for them and the outgrowth of al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and a major defeat for us, the United States. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins, and we'll turn to Mr. Cook of California.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Many of the questions or comments are things that I was going to address, and I just want to follow through on that. I think Mr. Higgins made some great comments about that. And I think we're all concerned simply because of the size and the nuclear weapons and everything else. But and there's the part of me that wants to say, you know, in all fairness, you know, Pakistan has been a great ally of ours, particularly from a military standpoint. And we never would have gotten that equipment out of Iraq because there was only one way to go, and that was through Pakistan. We kind of overlooked that. And of course, I still think the only country that's going to control Afghanistan's destiny is Pakistan. Whether you hate them, like them, or not, that to me, and I see you're shaking your head and you agree with that. All those things considered, I'm going to throw something which really, really scares me. And there's been talk that in light of the Iranian deal and the nuclear weapons in a Persian country, in a Shiite country, in your opinion, is there any possibility that Pakistan would not just give the technology or anything else, but actually sell nuclear weapons to the Sunni states with money, particularly, and I won't name them, but I think we all know who they are, that this proliferation would start on a scale that would just change the whole calculus of the region?
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for flagging the role that Pakistan had with the GLOCs and other forms of support for our operations in Afghanistan. I would say, with regard to nuclear weapons, first of all, I want to assure you that we do agree that nuclear security is a key issue. We have confidence in the capabilities of the security forces, the Pakistani security forces, to control and secure their nuclear weapons. We want to make sure that that continues to be the case. With regard to proliferation concerns, Pakistan has made an effort over the past few years, and we have worked very closely with them to tighten export controls and to make sure that they are not in a position of proliferating nuclear materials. This is involved, of course, a cleanup from a previous situation that existed a decade ago. Our assessment is that they have made considerable progress in this area.
Thank you. Switching gears a little bit, just like everybody on this committee, I'm afraid that there's one agency in Pakistan that I think the vast majority of us are afraid of, and that's because of their past history, and that's ISI. And their corruption, their agenda, and everything else. And more than that, the amount of influence that they have on the Pakistani government in terms of intrigue. I can go on and on and on, but just in terms of certain decisions. Can you give me any warm and fuzzy feeling about an organization that I think most of us are very, very nervous about? I'm from San Bernardino. I'm worried about the madrasas again. One of the terrorists came from there. And I just, that more than anything else in terms of one of the power factors in Pakistan, I am very, very, very nervous and cynical about. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Congressman. And let me just mention a couple of things on ISI. First of all, we do have a very robust engagement with ISI. I met with the ISI chief regularly during my tenure in Pakistan and made the points that I've described earlier about terrorism directly to him. ISI does have a role to play with regard to Afghan reconciliation, and we think that the role that Pakistan writ large played in bringing the Taliban to the table last summer was quite important, and they need to do that again, in our view, following up on the positive statements out of the Heart of Asia conference. On madrasas,
thank you very much. I know they're going to cut me off, but thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Ms. Gabbard of Hawaii.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on my colleague, Mr. Cook's questions, you know, the concern here is you're talking about robust engagement with the ISI, but there has been evidence time and time again of their direct and indirect connections with the Haqqani network. In 2011, then Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, called the Haqqani network a veritable arm of the ISI. So as you're having these discussions, you've talked a lot about how more must be done, discussions are taking place, but I'm wondering what action, what change in U.S. policy has occurred that would actually bring about a consequential shift?
Well, we continue to press at every point for action on the Haqqanis. We have done this at the highest levels of our government.
Has there been any change in the aid packages or the funding that we're providing?
Well, as you know, Congresswoman, there was a decrement of $300 million. From the coalition support funds, I believe under last year's National Defense Authorization Act. I would have to refer you to the Department of Defense for how that is being implemented. That was the $300 million was subject to a certification of cooperation from the Haqqanis. So I would have to refer you to the Department of Defense on that.
Well, I think the concern is that to say that there are serious doubts is an understatement on Pakistan's credibility when we talk about fighting these Islamic extremist elements, these terrorist elements, and even with nuclear cooperation. I think one of the greatest concerns as we look at how closely connected the Haqqani network and others are to Pakistan is the safety of the nuclear weapons that they have and preventing misuse. You've just said that you have confidence in the Pakistani security forces, but when you have these insider threats, when you have the Haqqani network being an arm of the ISI, how can you have confidence that they would not in any case gain access to these nuclear weapons or traffic them or get them into the wrong hands?
Well, I think that Pakistan has taken a lot of steps over the last years to tighten up its control of nuclear security. They're well aware of their responsibilities with regard to protecting, and I think that they have specifically taken into account the insider threat as well.
Can you speak with some specificity?
Ma'am, honestly, candidly, I would not be able to address these issues in any in this forum, but they're in another forum. It might be possible to do so.
Can you speak specifically to what Pakistan and the government has done to crack down on the Haqqani network or these other terrorist elements that have been and are directly linked to them?
Yes, ma'am. The launching of Operation Zarb-i-Azb in North Waziristan in June of 2014 was something that the United States had actually wanted to see for quite some time. Zarb-i-Azb was North Waziristan was where many of these militants, including the Haqqani network, were based in Miran Shah. Miran Shah was completely cleared, including the Haqqani network facilities, and armaments, tunnels, bunkers were uncovered, destroyed, and arms caches taken away, including 160 tons of precursors for improvised explosive devices. And this has had a disruptive effect not only on the Pakistani Taliban, but also on the Haqqani network, and by the way, Al-Qaeda, which probably had some presence there as well. And the Pakistanis, including ISI, have cooperated with us in taking down Al-Qaeda cells, including Adnan Shukri Juma, who was wanted for his plotting of attacks on the New York subway, and one other American citizen individual who was extradited from Pakistan in April of this year. So there has been quite a bit of counterterrorism cooperation between ISI and the Pakistan government writ large and the United States, and we believe that's been to our national interest.
Thank you. My time has expired, but I think as we look at U.S. policy towards Pakistan, this is something that we need to carefully consider. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. The chair now recognizes himself. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being here. I had the privilege of traveling to Islamabad and then to South Waziristan. We couldn't go to North Waziristan because it was too dangerous. And so we understand and appreciate the difficulty of your position and the tenuous circumstances of the relationship with Pakistan. That having been said, do we, as a Department of State, as the United States government, have a time-related series of metrics to determine success or failure of our relationship and the money that the American taxpayer is spending regarding that relationship? Can you tell me of any?
Mr. Chair, thanks very much, and let me say it's a great pleasure to see you again after seeing you in Islamabad. For the assistance programs, that of course is the responsibility of our colleagues in USAID by and large, and they do have an extensive program of metrics and tracking their development assistance.
So let me cut to, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm trying to get to the terror situation, which is what we're really concerned about. We know we spend billions of dollars on military assistance, on humanitarian assistance, but what we're really getting to is this relationship where Pakistan seems to be kind of walking the line, somewhere between terrorism and somewhere between the support of the United States government And with all due respect, as long as we allow them to continue to walk the line, they're going to continue to walk the line because it's in their interest to do that. So what, and I'll give you some of my metrics, but are there any metrics regarding terrorism that are time-related where the American people can see they're getting some value out of the billions of dollars we spend?
Well, I think that there has been a shift in Pakistan. During the time I was there, the 3 years that I was there, I definitely saw a shift in the public discourse on the terrorism issue. I think there is now a very broad consensus in Pakistani politics that it is necessary to go after these extremist groups. There was a period, I think, of doubt about the efficacy of going after the Pakistani Taliban, and that ended with the operation in North Waziristan in June of 2014. There was a broad consensus, and it certainly was reinforced by the horrific incident of a year ago at the Peshawar Army School.
Mr. Ambassador, what's the cost of the F-16 deal to the American taxpayer? Do you know what that price is?
Well, Mr. Chair, as a matter of policy, we do not discuss prospective arms sales until they have been formally notified.
But we know it's not cheap, right?
Let
me just give you some of my metrics because my time is short here and I want to make a couple points. So in Pakistan, you've got al-Qaeda, you've got the Afghan Taliban, the Haqqani Network, the TTP, and the LET operating, which are all terrorist organizations. Meanwhile, at the same time, over the past 14, 15 years, the American people have spent $30 billion in our relationship with Pakistan. Meanwhile, a poll conducted by the Pew Research Center last year found only 14% of Pakistanis expressed a positive view of the United States. Pakistan seems neither particularly democratic nor tolerant regarding regarding their governance or the religious tolerance. And then you look at, we talk about this individual, Mr. Afridi, who allegedly helped the United States get the #1 terrorist on our list. And meanwhile, the backdrop is that this terrorist organization, just for instance, the LET, been active in Pakistan, as I already stated, Afghanistan and Kashmir since the 1990s. It's not new. And Pakistan funded the group, and the Pakistani Inter-Service Intelligence, the ISI agency, helped establish the organization's military structure. And almost all LET members are Pakistani madrasa students or Afghan veterans. In November 2008, 10 LET members conducted a coordinated terrorist attack on targets in Mumbai, India, killing 160 people, including 4 Americans. In December 2008, Pakistan arrested Zaki-ur-Rahman, whatever his last name is, the LET leader who organized the Mumbai attacks. They arrested him. However, in April 2015, this guy was released from jail on a $2,300 bond, and there's been no trial scheduled for this guy. Meanwhile, the good Dr. Afridi, remains in a jail, and we're going to sell or make some deal with Pakistan for F-16s where we've got neighbors that are much better allies. We understand the tenuous circumstance, but when are we going to equate our relationship, our financial relationship, with results about terrorism? Do you see that happening anytime? Quantifiable results where the American people can see the value of this relationship. Sir.
Well, let me, if I could respond to a couple of points, Mr. Chair. First, on Dr. Afridi, we fully agree with you that he has been unjustly imprisoned, and we've communicated this at the highest level to...
But why don't we tie it to our actions? Why don't we tie his release? Why don't we tie the trial of this other individual who attacked our ally to the sale of these weapons systems and to our aid? Why don't we make... Who's negotiating these deals on our behalf?
Well, Mr. Chair, we believe that, and again, I can't talk about the details of a prospective notification, but let me say that we believe that the F-16s that we have already sold to Pakistan or provided under security assistance have been used to advance our national interests. They have been used against terrorists in North Waziristan and in the tribal areas. The precision strike capability of the F-16s, and our programs are focused on counterinsurgency and counterterrorism.
Mr. Ambassador, I appreciate it. I understand the value of the weapons system and what it can do. We appreciate that. We understand that. We are very frustrated that for the American people's involvement, we don't see a whole lot coming on the other side of the ledger, but that's my personal perception. With that, my time's expired. I'd like to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up. I think you've probably touched on some of these answers already, but I really want to kind of deal with my own concerns, like Mr. Congressman Higgins and Cook and others. I am troubled about the reports of Pakistan's development of what I consider destabilizing tactical nuclear weapons at a faster rate than most other countries, if not than any other country. I really want to understand again a little bit more clearly your assessment of Pakistan's progress in cooperating with international community on nuclear proliferation concerns. And also, the second part of that question has to do with some recent media reports suggesting that our administration is considering some kind of nuclear arrangement with Pakistan. I don't know, I'm not really clear what is a nuclear arrangement, and if we are considering, is Pakistan really a trustworthy partner, again, in that? Again, like other members, the nuclear proliferation treaty concerns are very troubling.
Thank you, Congressman, and we share your concern about the scope and pace of Pakistan's nuclear program. We do have an active dialogue on nonproliferation issues. We have a security.
Has Pakistan increased the rate of the production of tactical nuclear weapons?
We continue to have concerns about the scope and pace, sir. I think that's probably all I can say in this particular venue. But I did want to address one other issue that you raised. I can assure you, despite some press reports to the contrary, that we are not negotiating a 1-2-3 agreement, a so-called 1-2-3 agreement, a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with Pakistan.
In any way. Are we setting any preconditions or any conditions? This goes back to about or talking to Pakistan about the reduction of its nuclear weapons.
We've had a very candid discussion with the Pakistanis about some of the concerns that we have, including about shorter range nuclear systems. And Pakistan has been prepared to engage with us in those discussions.
And I gather for the last 60 years we've provided over $75 billion in assistance, primarily in military and economic assistance to Pakistan. Going back to the question asked by the chair, is any of our assistance that you know tied to changes in Pakistan's behavior?
There are some very specific metrics and conditions that we use in all of our assistance programs. I mean, specific to the nature of the program, particularly in civilian assistance. With regard to security assistance, what we have done is negotiated a framework with the Pakistanis in which our security assistance is focused on the counterinsurgency and counterterrorism missions. And I think it's also particularly worth noting that two additional provisions. Obviously, all of our assistance is subject to the Leahy Amendment, and we have a very rigorous Leahy process. This addresses the question of human rights. In addition to that, we have very stringent end-use monitoring requirements on the Pakistanis, especially with regard to high technology security assistance. And I can say that we are very strict on those, and the results have been satisfactory.
What does that mean, the results have been satisfactory?
That we believe that the end-use monitoring systems have been effective.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Chairman thanks the gentleman from California. Chairman recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ambassador, appreciate it. And I was fortunate to go over to Afghanistan with Chairman Ross Layton, and we had an informative trip. Just to rehash, you know, we've given $30 billion since 2001 to Pakistan. You know, and you look through the list of here, there's at least 5 terrorist networks that we know that are operating in the FATA area, along with ISIS is in that area. And we've heard over and over again it's a no man's land. There is no rule. And in order to get peace in that area, there can't be the threat of terrorism. And is Pakistan, is their goal to get rid of terrorism? I mean, how serious are they? Because I'm not seeing it.
Sir, thank you. We have agreed for many years that the threat from the tribal areas was significant. And in that regard,
how serious is Pakistan about bringing this to an end? It's like my mom. I told her I wanted to play piano, but I wasn't real serious about it, and I never learned how to play it. So if you're serious about it, you'll do it. And if you're not going to do it. And with $30 billion of the American taxpayers' money going into that area, and we rewarded Pakistan by giving them, selling the initial F-16s as them helping us after 9/11, and then we suspended that because we've seen them complicit working against us in Afghanistan. But yet we hear they want to have peace in that area. They want to have talks and have the concurrent resolutions and talks with India. But if you're not willing to stand up and stomp out terrorism, you're not real serious about it. Correct me, is just yes or no? Am I right or wrong on that?
Well, Congressman, Pakistan has launched operations in North Waziristan. They have reasserted their sovereign authority over North Waziristan.
What kind of attacks have they done? I mean, we did sorties against ISIS in the summer of a year and a half ago, but they weren't really meaningful. I mean, we were doing 5 to 10 maybe a month. If you're serious, you go in and annihilate that.
Yeah, well, they have completely cleared the city of Miran Shah, which was the headquarters of, amongst others, the Haqqani Network and the Pakistani Taliban. Completely cleared it. I've been to downtown Miran Shah. There is no one there. So they cleared the city and cleared all of the networks. They have taken 488 casualties, just in deaths, amongst their soldiers. Just in Operation Zarbiat. So I think their commitment is serious to fighting terrorism.
It needs to get...
But the concern that we have, sir, and I have flagged this, is that we think that more needs to be done against the Haqqani Network and some of the groups that threaten Pakistan's neighbors, not just the ones that threaten them internally.
Well, and if you look at the recent attack in California, Tashfeen Malik studied at an all-women's Islamic religious school in Pakistan. So it's still working against us. It's still creating terrorism. And then the debate largely borders on these F-16s. Efforts by Congress to place conditional requirements upon aid to Pakistan due to the country's support for terror have consistently been waived by administrations, which argues that the U.S. assistance is essential to build Pakistan's counterterrorism capabilities. And so let me ask you, in general, what specific contributions have Pakistan's F-16s that they've had from us made to U.S. counterterrorism's objectives in South and Central America? What can you say they've done definitively that I can go back to the people that I represent and say, no, this is a good thing, we want to keep it because it's going to give us peace down the road? We've said this for 30 years and we're not seeing it. In fact, we're going backwards in this. So what benefits have these F-16s done? And I got a follow-up question if you can...
Yes, sir. Well, I mean, they have used the F-16 for precision strikes in the tribal areas. I don't have the specific metrics with me here today on the numbers of strikes that they have conducted, but they're a regular feature of their operations, and we believe they have been effective in taking out terrorists that are of concern to us as well as to them.
The administration has no real idea what policies Pakistan will be pursuing against militants in the tribal area when any new aircraft will be delivered, each of which will generally take 3 years to produce and deliver. Would you recommend giving them more, selling them more airplanes with the results we've gotten so far, and the $30 billion, because you read off an impressive list of schools, education, Fulbright scholarships. I'm not seeing the return on investment here to bring this to an end. And you know where we are in America with the American sentiment. They want this to end.
Sir, with regard to the F-16s, let me say that we believe that they have been a very effective instrument of counterinsurgency and counterterrorism. Now, as I said, out of respect for our for congressional prerogatives, we do not discuss prospective sales until they've been formally notified.
But yet they protected Osama bin Laden all those years. I mean, there's no way they didn't know about that. I mean, nobody can convince me of anything different. And so, yeah, they're effective over here hitting a beehive, or they're treating a tumor, a malignant metastatic tumor over here, but the main tumor is over here. And we need to go after the main root cause of our problems before I can support any sales of those. Thank you.
Thank you. On November 18th, Anwar Lagari, the brother of the Sind activist who is the chief advocate here in Washington, Munamar Lagari, was killed. There's an ongoing investigation. I want to thank you and the State Department for the Consul General's focus on this. It raises the bigger issue as to whether there are forces in Pakistan that are simply hostile to any region of the country other than Punjab. What percentage of the general officers of the military are Punjabi? I don't know if you have that available.
I do not have that available, Congressman, and we can take that back and see if we have that information. I can tell you anecdotally from my personal experience, it's a high proportion, but it's not an exclusive proportion.
Okay. Zero-based budgeting. Most people I represent feel that the roughly $2 billion we give Pakistan could be better spent in the San Fernando Valley. If we're not willing to talk about simply a zero figure for our aid to Pakistan, we have no leverage. The doctor that helped us get Osama bin Laden will be rotting in prison. Do we have a plan as one of several options to go to zero? And what would we expect the Pakistani response to be? Is it considered an act of war to fail to give another country money?
Well, sir, we believe that engagement with Pakistan is in our national.
Other countries don't give them money and they still talk. I'm not saying we close our embassy. Are you saying the Pakistanis would refuse to talk to us does every other country have to give them money as a party gift to go to have a conversation?
Well, we think that our assistance programs, whether we're talking about civilian or military, have actually done a lot to improve the conditions in the case of civilians, of the lives of ordinary Pakistanis. And Pakistan is facing an enormous demographic challenge. I mean, it is a country of 190 million people. It has a youth bulge. The youth are about to come into the most productive years of their lives. Either they're going to have jobs or not have jobs. We think the
Well, I know that we do some good for Pakistanis. If we spent that money in India or in Congo, we would do an equal amount of good. What is the Pakistani response if we simply say zero?
Well, I really can't say what the government of Pakistan would
So
say.
we're
That is
spending
not-
$2 billion, much of it military, and if we eliminated the military aid, it's clear that the Pakistani military does some good. It's also clear that the Pakistani military and the ISA do some harm. Have we discussed with the Pakistanis that perhaps Congress would simply specify zero, particularly if we didn't see some changes in policy, starting with the release of the doctor who helped us get Osama bin Laden? Have you talked to the Pakistanis that there is sentiment in the Congress to go to zero?
I will be happy to convey that sentiment, Congressman, and I think that's a point that we can make. The administration's position is that we believe that the assistance programs that we have are in our national interest. They're in our national. It's in our national interest to have Pakistan be stable and prosperous, rather than the alternative. And it is in our national interest to have Pakistan conducting counterinsurgency and counterterrorism operations in the western part of the country.
Do we have assurance that the money we give them is not used for oppression and terrorism rather than prosperity and counterterrorism? Money is fungible. They may be confronting the Haqqani network or not, or they may be funding the organizations that killed people in Mumbai. How do we know which of those two activities our money is funding?
Well, sir, we're very careful about how we spend our money and what we spend it on. And with regard to this, to the military assistance, it's subjected to a very intensive Leahy amendment vetting process. And there is no question that we continue to raise these issues that you flag, the question of the Haqqanis, the need to do more on the Haqqanis and on Lashkar-e-Taiba with the Pakistani government at every occasion.
Unless they think that you're willing, under some circumstances, to recommend zero to the United States Congress, you will not achieve our objectives. And the biggest weather vane is the physician that helped us get Osama bin Laden. For us to ignore that they were harboring him in one of their safest and most military towns, and then say we should ignore the fact that they have that doctor in prison, it begs the question of whether the aid we give them is warranted. I yield back.
Thank you. I'm going to return to the points that I made in my opening statement. I was absent for a while. We had 3 bills debated on the House floor that our committee put out, including the legislation authored by myself and Elliot Engel on targeting Hezbollah. Several other co-sponsors here, like Mr. Sherman, that we'll be voting on this afternoon. But if I could return to some of the points that I made, I opened with this observation about the Deobandi schools in Pakistan. Now, there are 600 of these specifically that I'm concerned with, that over the years we have tried to convince the government to shut them down. They're funded primarily by the Gulf states, by individuals, by families in the Gulf states who make these charitable contributions, as they're called. But the problem is that the graduates out of these schools basically have a foundation in radical ideology. So we have the National Action Plan that has been set up by the government. I asked the Congressional Research Service about that particular plan, and they say nearly 1 year later, there remains limited evidence that the government's National Action Plan has brought major policy changes. So I wanted to ask you about that, ask you, Ambassador, about your dialogue with the government about shutting these down so that we shut down the foundation from which this radicalization is occurring. Many of those young people that come out of that experience will go on to become clerics either in Pakistan or elsewhere, and they will continue to expand on this radical jihadist ideology that is advanced in that comes out of the Gulf states and is now being taught.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me say that we share your concern about the madrasas. We think it's a serious issue. We thought it was significant that it was for the first time addressed as an issue nationally in the National Action Plan that was put out last year. Our understanding is that the government is in the process of putting together a greater regulatory framework for the madrasas. It is presently mapping geotag.
But this isn't rocket science. We're not talking about all madrasas. We're talking about the Deobandi schools. As the Dawn editorial, the newspaper Dawn, said, branding all madrasas as incubators of hate and violence is wrong, but there is little doubt that there still exist across Pakistan religious centers that continue to spew hate, and unless that infrastructure of hate is shut down, Pakistan will never win its struggle for internal peace. That's the issue. We have the list of the 600 schools. I've made 3 trips, as I've indicated, to try to convince the government to shut those down. We've had little success in convincing families in the Gulf states not to send their money there, or convincing those governments in the Gulf states not to fund this. It's a phenomenon that, frankly, it's so frustrating, because what we see is the failure of the government time and time again to address issues that are in that government's own best interest. And this, to me, given the knowledge about what goes on in those 600 schools, is the most obvious and vexing problem that is right in front of us. What do people in the government say about that issue?
Well, I have had some discussions about this, Mr. Chairman, and I agree that there is a huge challenge with the madrasas. The reason, in a way, that they exist and have become popular in Pakistan, if that's the word, is because they do provide a free education. And this has to do with the fact
we're talking past each other. I'm not talking about all the madrasas that provide a free education. I'm talking about the 600 that you and I know are in this particular line of ideological radicalization. And on that issue, clearly, given the amount of money that is spent towards education in the budget, which is about 2.4% that actually goes towards education, I understand. I mean, this is one of the debates here in terms of F-16s and other military hardware is, wouldn't Pakistan be better served addressing this issue of shutting down these 600 schools, and if they do it, funding public education there for individuals, for families, as an alternative for their sons to go to those schools, in this case, instead of the lads going to schools where you and I suspect the final outcome is going to be like a lot of others that were radicalized in those Deobandi schools.
Yeah. I would agree with that analysis. Mr. Chairman, we think that what has to be done is there has to be a further reform of the public education system. The public education system is not delivering in Pakistan, and it has to be a viable alternative for parents who otherwise have no choice but to send their children to schools that are free, and indeed where not only are they free, but food is provided. So there's a real draw factor in all of this. We also think that it's important that the government of Pakistan, and we're working with in this area, in the countering violent extremism area, to try to reform the curriculum so that at least in the religiously oriented schools there are marketable skills or standardized curricula, and there are attempts to address a more modern perspective.
Well, my time has expired, but I'm going to ask unanimous consent that Representative Sheila Jackson Lee be next in terms of asking any questions. She's not on the committee, but she wanted to participate today, so without objection, we'll go to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas.
Is much appreciated, along with the ranking member. Thank you so very much. I chair the Congressional Pakistan Caucus with my colleague and have done so for more than a decade. So thank you very much for your presence here. I'm going to go pointedly to a question dealing with an American doctor some years back. In 2014, Dr. Mehdi Ali Kamar out of Chicago, I believe, who came on a mission to serve, and of course, he had a different religious background, Ahmadiyya, and I'm just wondering, did we ever solve his killing, and was there any response to that very tragic incident? From Chicago, I believe.
Yeah, Congressman, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you so very much.
I am afraid I do not have any details on that particular case, so if I can get back to you with a response, I would do so. Of course, we continue to have concern about in general, the treatment of religious minorities in Pakistan, and it's a key area of our engagement.
So let me just follow up. You just made a key area. I happen to think it's an important issue, and I'm just wondering, how are we pursuing this whole issue of religious tolerance?
Yeah. Well, I think that there have been some developments over time in Pakistan that give us a little bit of space for trying to advance this. One of them certainly was the decision by the Supreme Court under Justice Jilani in June of 2014 to extend greater protection to religious minorities. We, think that that's a positive step that needs to be followed up on with the government. We have an ongoing dialogue about the rights of religious minorities, and we have as a particular concern about blasphemy laws, not just in Pakistan, but everywhere in the world, because of their subject, the possibility of their being subject to abuse. And that has been the case in certain instances in Pakistan. We think it's within the context of having, concerns about the framework, the legal framework in which Pakistan conducts anti-blasphemy laws. We think it is positive that the case of Asia Bibi has moved to the Supreme Court, and we will continue to press the government of Pakistan for proper treatment of religious minorities.
Well, let me thank you, and first of all, let me say it's very good to see you, and thank you for your service both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I'm probably going to focus on Pakistan and then maybe a slight question within the time frame that I have left. I know that you've answered the question about Dr. Afridi and his status. When the President Sharif was here, I questioned him. It seems as if he was trying to suggest that there are other issues. Do you have any update? You may have given it already in other testimony, but if I can get that quickly. And let me just follow up with my other question, which is, when the Prime Minister was here, there was certainly an impression given Pakistan that he was attempting to continue to build on democratic principles, focus on economic development, education, issues that we would be concerned about, and certainly existence, if you will, with India. And so I'm wondering what your assessment is, but if you would start with the status of the doctor, and then lastly, if you could give me just a little bit about Afghanistan. I'm concerned in terms of whether or not the frontier land or the areas are even embraced by the central government, and whether or not we actually have a functioning, tranquil, growing government in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Congresswoman. With regard to Dr. Afridi, we do believe there's no reason for his continued detention. We've been assured by the Pakistanis that he is in good health, but we continue to press his case absolutely at the highest levels of our government and seek his release.
And you see no other accounts or charges, which has been represented to me that there's some other charges. You see no reason for him to continue to be incarcerated.
Well, we just believe inherently that he should not be in a position of detention for helping out in the capture, the Osama bin Laden raid. So that has been our position from the outset.
And you continue at the United Nations level and other levels to be able to secure his release?
Yes,
the country.
We continue to work every avenue that's open to us and continue to press hard on it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions I have?
Yeah, and with regard to Afghanistan, the government has actually does face some challenges. It's not surprising, but on the other hand, the Government of National Unity has held together for over a year. The Government of National Unity, any Government of National Unity, coalition government anywhere, is there are challenges associated with it. When I was in Kabul last week, I got a sense of renewed determination from the government to improve its governance, particularly after the security challenges that it has faced over the last year. It is drawing lessons learned from the experiences of the past year and is making more government appointments, and there's a particular provincial focus to the government's reform efforts right now.
If the chairman would be kind enough, if you could just, under Prime Minister Sharif, who came to the United States, do you see the country moving toward more democratic principles, economic development? You're in and out of the country. Do we have a line or a measuring stick that moves Pakistan with all of its population, all of its desire for education to a level where you're empowering the many young people that are there in the country?
Yes, Congresswoman, thank you. There was an important transition in Pakistan, as you know, in June of 2013, when the first civilian elected government took over from a civilian elected government. I mean, the first successful civilian transition in Pakistan's 65-year history at that point. And I think that after facing some domestic political challenges, the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has, I think, largely settled those political issues, and I think the political situation is stable, and the government has indeed focused on several key areas, stabilizing the economy. Pakistan was, the coffers were quite empty at the time that the Nawaz government took over, and there was the potential at that point of a balance of payments crisis. Pakistan is now on an IMF program. It's been through 8 tranches, and that's longer than any previous IMF program in history. There are still some important structural reforms that need to be undertaken, especially in the energy sector, but on the other hand, they have moved to diversify their energy supply. They are importing liquefied natural gas with a company from Houston, helping out in that process, which we were very happy to try to promote successfully. And they have also focused on infrastructure. The Prime Minister has also committed to increasing the proportion of spending on education, and in that regard, I think it's worth noting that the Prime Minister's daughter, Maryam Sharif, signed on with the First Lady, Mrs. Obama, for the Let Girls Learn initiative during the Prime Minister's visit. And in that regard, Pakistan has expressed its seriousness about addressing issues of education, particularly for adolescent girls. And we encourage them to continue to increase their funding on education.
Thank you for your service, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for your courtesies. I yield back.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Elliot Engel of New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Ambassador Olson. It's good to see you. We had a good meeting yesterday in my office. I was just debating a bill on the House floor and also a New York delegation, so I apologize for missing the first part of the hearing. But we discussed many of the issues, and I am delighted with your appointment. This week, what I'm going to do is make a statement and then ask you to comment on it. This week, we marked 5 years since the passing of Ambassador Holbrooke, who was our first special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we still feel his loss. He left a remarkable legacy, and his final effort was laying the groundwork for resolving the long conflict in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I hope we're able to take advantage of that work. And as I mentioned before, Ambassador Olson, I'm confident that with your previous experience in both Afghanistan and Pakistan, this important task is in the right hands. When President Obama took office, I was encouraged by the bipartisan commitment to support our military forces, diplomats, and development workers in Afghanistan, and to renew our partnership with the civilian leadership of Pakistan. This focus on Pakistan was reflected in the Kerry-Lugar-Berman bill passed by Congress in 2009, but that authorization recently expired, and now is a good time to take stock of the status of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. We're used to hearing some bad news about Pakistan, but the Pakistani people have achieved some noteworthy accomplishments in recent years. Pakistan has seen its first peaceful transfer of power from one democratically elected government to another. I think this was a historic moment for the country. Thanks to collaboration with our own USAID, today Pakistan has added 1,750 megawatts of electricity to its energy grid, 30,000 new jobs, nearly 1,000 new or refurbished schools, and the more than 18,000 newly trained teachers. And let me commend our development experts for their hard work in a very challenging environment. On the security side, we've seen much more modest progress. Terrorist groups based in Pakistan continue to pose a serious threat to Americans, Pakistanis, and our partners throughout the South Asia and the world. Moreover, Pakistan has provided some extremist groups safe haven and a permissive environment that allows extremist ideology to spread. The results, terrorist attacks in Afghanistan and India, in the UK and here in the United States, but the hardest hit have been the Pakistani people. Terrorism inside Pakistan has killed more than 50,000 people since 2003. That's 50,000 people. A year ago today, terrorists affiliated with the Pakistani Taliban, also known as TTP, massacred more than 140 teachers and students at the Army Public School in Peshawar. Absolutely horrific. After years of prodding and far too many lives lost, the Pakistani government finally took military action against TTP in North Waziristan. Along with many others, I had high hopes for those efforts. I was also hopeful when Pakistan's parliament took a leading role in establishing a national action plan to comprehensively address terrorism in the aftermath of the Peshawar attacks. And Pakistan's government decided it would no longer differentiate between good and bad terrorists. That suggested a real change in Pakistan's approach, a positive change to addressing terrorism in the country. But yet again, we've seen little evidence that the government of Pakistan has followed through on these commitments. And so some violent groups continue to operate in Pakistan with impunity, including the Haqqani network, responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans in Afghanistan, and Lashkar-e-Toiba, also called LET, the group responsible for the 2008 Mumbai attacks, which also cost American lives. There are some in Pakistan who believe they can manage these groups, yet Lashkar terrorists end up fighting our troops in Afghanistan, and Haqqani network terrorists have pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda. It's clear that Pakistan is a long way from solving these problems. So, Ambassador Olson, as we discuss these issues, I hope we can focus on a few key areas. First of all, what is it going to take for Pakistan to stop differentiating between good and bad terrorists and start treating all terrorists as bad and all terrorists as the threat that they are? Does our own policy effectively convey to Pakistan that the harm from these relationships outweigh any perceived benefit? Next, I'm curious about how Pakistani acquiescence in or support for terrorist groups is affecting its neighbors. Can Afghanistan stabilize while Pakistan continues to host groups like the Haqqani Network? Can Pakistan and India have a normal relationship when Pakistan continues to support LET? And lastly, I'm concerned about the messages we're sending when we continue to provide Pakistan security assistance despite Pakistan's ongoing relationships with the Haqqani Network and LET. We need to be clear-eyed about Pakistan's counterterrorism efforts. Now, I believe in the U.S.-Pakistan alliance. I believe that the United States and Pakistan should be allies and continue to work together. But I think the question about terrorism is a very important question, and it really has not been satisfactorily, in my opinion, met by the Pakistani government. Also, I hope we can soon see a country strategy for Pakistan and Afghanistan from USAID so that we can maximize the remaining foreign assistance to both countries. In my view, we need to include incentives and encourage Pakistan to make much-needed energy sector and tax reforms. We all want to see a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Pakistan that is an integrated part of a larger, more connected Central and South Asia. This simply cannot happen with the continued instability that exists in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I'm wondering, Ambassador, if you could answer some of these questions I made. If you've already done it, then we can do it in writing afterwards. But if you can answer it, I'd be grateful. Thank you. And I wish you good luck. And as I said before, I think you're the right man for the job.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ranking Member Engel. That means a great deal to me that I enjoy your confidence, and thank you for your support. You started by mentioning it's 5 years since the death of Richard Holbrooke. I was actually in his outer office waiting to see him on the day that he collapsed, and I think all of us who are working on this account greatly miss him to this day, and I'm well aware that I'm filling very big shoes. And thank you for your very comprehensive and balanced statement. Let me say that with regard particularly to the issue of terrorism, we appreciate the statements that Pakistan has made at the level of the Prime Minister and the Army Chief of not differentiating between good and bad terrorists. We think there is still work to be done in this area. We think that Pakistan has moved decisively against terrorists that threaten Pakistan internally, but still needs to devote attention to those that represent a threat to their neighbors. You asked about particularly the effect on Afghanistan. I would just note that we had a very constructive week last week with the Heart of Asia conference at which President Ghani attended, in which Pakistan committed in its public statements to uphold the sovereignty, territorial integrity, legitimacy of the Afghan government and its constitution, which was important for the Afghan side. And they committed to renewing and reinvigorating a peace process. Pakistan did host talks at Murray between the Taliban and the Afghan government, the first such talks last summer in July, and I think we are all agreed that it is important to get a political settlement process going with a sense of urgency, and we look to Pakistan to help to bring the Taliban to the table. At the same time, we continue to raise our concerns about the threat that specifically the Haqqani Network represent to us and our forces and our embassy and civilians in Afghanistan, as well as the Taliban more generally. And finally, we certainly have the same view with regard to Lashkar-e-Taiba and the need to not just ban Lashkar-e-Taiba, but to take action with regard to prosecuting the perpetrators of Mumbai. Thank you.
Thank you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I believe Mr. Higgins had an additional question or two.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. you know, I just keep going back to the double game that's being played by Pakistan. And, you know, you had said that Pakistan expressed a seriousness in addressing the education needs of its country. Pakistan spends 3% of its budget on education, 3%. Spends 3% of its budget on infrastructure. According to the World Economic Forum, countries that spend less than 15% on education, healthcare, and infrastructure are countries that are very susceptible to collapse. So when Pakistan says or expresses a seriousness in addressing its educational needs, one only needs to look at the amount of budgetary resource it's addressing for that need. Additionally, Pakistan, I think, inflates the amount it spends on counterterrorism operations so it can receive more money, particularly from us. And as been stated here throughout this hearing, some $30 billion over the past 15 years has been spent, both military and economic development aid for Pakistan. According to U.S. military officials, the legitimate costs are only about 30%. So my question is, where is the rest of that money going? And it's very, very significant, and I suspect for nefarious purposes. You know, and are we winning the hearts and minds of Pakistanis, given the extraordinary aid that we've provided? Well, I would refer you to the Pew Research Center, which says that the majority of Pakistanis view the United States as the enemy. The majority say that U.S. assistance has a negative or no impact at all. And Pakistan is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. So I think by any measure, when you look at the extraordinary aid that we have provided, at the very least, we have not used that aid package as a basis from which to force very, very reasonable reforms with respect to helping the Pakistanis help their own people. Because if you're not making a commitment to education, if you're not making a commitment to health care, if you're not building the roads and bridges of your community, why are we? You know, we spent $87 billion rebuilding the roads and bridges of Afghanistan. Spent $73 billion rebuilding the roads and bridges of Iraq. Roads and bridges, they blow up to kill our people. So, you know, I think if anything, and you know, when we look at this exercise today, this hearing, as underscoring, I think, the urgency of better utilizing the leverage that we have with Pakistan, so to ensure that not only that money is more wisely spent, but we, you know, the benefactors of huge amounts of foreign aid to Pakistan aren't viewed by the vast majority of the Pakistani people as the enemy, and the money that we give them as ineffective.
Thank you, Congressman, and I appreciate the very thoughtful comments that you've offered here. And we agree with you on the need for Pakistan to be investing more in education, in health, in its own people. I mean, I think there's really no doubt about that, and we support Prime Minister Nawaz's stated commitment to devoting 4% to education, 4% of GDP, and we'd like to see that. We'd like to see that happen. I think it does have to be said that Pakistan faces a huge number of challenges right now. It faces huge security challenges, and we could have a very long discussion about how that happened, and I think you know, there are certainly large domestic factors at play, and I think Pakistan is attempting to turn that security situation around, but that does consume, I think, a significant amount of their budget in doing so. On the question of hearts and minds and views of Americans, it's not a happy story, and I agree with you. On the other hand, it is something that is somewhat improving. The numbers have gradually improved on Pakistanis' perceptions of Americans. I can tell you from personal experience that I think there's less of an impression now amongst the political elite that the United States is playing some kind of nefarious role with regard to Pakistani domestic politics. In other words, we are perceived as not intervening in Pakistani politics, and that's because we haven't. We've been very careful not to do that. So I think that this is something that's not going to change overnight, but the trends are, albeit modest, they're in a positive direction, and I think we need to keep working away at that.
Thank you.
Well, Ambassador, I'm going to yield time to Mr. Brad Sherman of California for an additional question.
Pakistan is the only schizophrenic nuclear power. Winning over the people of Pakistan is one of the most important things that we can do. Voice of America spends a lot of money around the world. I hope that you would be an advocate for making sure that we have a robust program, not just in Urdu, but also in Sindhi and the other languages. Please do not be fooled by them saying, well, a lot of people have some working knowledge of Urdu. You're in the marketing business. People in my town spend billions of dollars advertising in Spanish to people who prefer to listen in Spanish. They don't say, well, we're going to test those people and see what is their working knowledge. You reach people in the language they want to listen in. And the fact that we're talking about $2 billion a year and we're not spending $1 million a year to reach people in the Sindhi language is something I hope you'll do something about. I've been trying. I have not been successful. I'm counting on you. I want to second just about everything Mr. Higgins said. I was an advocate in my first 5 minutes, or devil's advocate, for a zero-based budget for Pakistan. That's obviously not what we're going to do. I do hope that you'll confer the Pakistanis, though, that if there ever was a vote on the floor of the House to say not one the penny can be dispersed until Dr. Afridi and his family were safe here, it would pose a danger to the U.S. Congress because we'd be stampeding to vote yes, and that would be a danger to some of our colleagues. As to, yes, if they were in the way of the stampede, those voting first would be stampeded by those trying to be first. Focusing on that aid, obviously schools are important. USAID dedicated more than $155 million to building and improving schools in Sindh. In a 2014 USAID Inspector General report found that 3 years in, the program was not achieving its goals, that it had unrealistic expectations, that no schools had been built, that there was little improvement in early grade reading. That was a report in 2014. Has anything been done to make sure that education aid in Sindh is more effectively spent? And if you don't have that information, you can respond for the record.
Thank you very much, Congressman Sherman. Let me say with regard to Sindhi, I hope you're aware that our Consulate General in Karachi has started putting out all of its social media work in Sindhi, and it's received a very positive reaction. So Facebook...
that idea may have come from Congress. Go on.
We're happy to implement it, and I will take back the message on Voice of America. I don't have specific detailed information on the schools in Sindh, but I can tell you that I have participated in the inauguration of schools. So they are being built; they're going up. But I will have to get you a detailed status report.
I look forward to that. I'd also like you to explore with USAID the idea that a good chunk of our aid should go there in the form of providing free textbooks. That would allow us to make sure that the content of those textbooks, while perhaps not passing a politically correct test in a Democratic club in the San Fernando Valley, would be consistent with, if not reflective of, American values. Second, every student sees on the front page, provided by the people of the United States every day. Third, it's very hard to steal a textbook, because if the United States is providing free textbooks, who are you going to sell the textbooks to? Everybody who wants textbooks got it for free. And fourth, one of the advantages of a Madras is they got free textbooks. We ought to have free textbooks. Finally, Pakistan, what would it take to get Pakistan to be a status quo power? That is to say, generally accepting a Kashmir situation. Is there any amount of development aid the world could provide to the Kashmiri people? Is there any change in the level of local autonomy that India could provide? Is there, I realize everybody wants to get a Nobel Prize for solving the Israeli-Palestinian question. There might be a prize in it for you. Is there anything, not so that Pakistan would formally accept the situation, but so that they could calm down, agree to live for a decade or so without Kashmir being at the top of their list?
If I might interject here.
Yeah, I've gone a little long.
I am aware that Ambassador Olson has to appear on the Senate side, and I'm aware that...
Oh, that's not important.
Regardless of our feelings on this, he might interpret it differently. And so maybe that is a longer discussion that we might have either in writing or sit down with him
and we were supposed to meet in my office. They closed every school in my district. I look forward to meeting with you.
All right. Thank you. And just in closing, I did want to bring up the remarks that Mr. Engel made about your predecessor, Ambassador Olson, in your job, Ambassador Richard Holbrooke. He was a personal friend to myself and Elliot Engel, and I know certainly from the day that he began engaging with this committee, I remember the Dayton Peace Accords and the work he did on Bosnia and Kosovo with Elliot Engel and others, with those of us here. We counted him as someone who had very wise counsel on a lot of issues. We miss him. I can't help but feel when I reflect upon your predecessor that the stress of the job may have had something to do with his heart giving out. We wish you, Ambassador, well in your responsibilities here, and we appreciate your time and patience today. I know that you're on your way to the Senate, so I'll just say what you've heard is some deep concerns from both sides of the aisles here today about the direction, this issue about getting more money into public education in Pakistan. It's clear to us that this has got to be a priority. Members are frustrated. You've got a difficult job, but you've got the full backing from us to weigh in forcefully with the responsibilities you have in your position. So with that said, we thank you again, and we stand adjourned.